Hi, my name is Meng Leong. Today I'd like to share about AI for future-ready policymaking in education. So, from the perspective of policymakers in education, there could be macro, meso, as well as micro levels. At a macro level, it could be an education ecosystem. At a meso level, school level projects. At a micro level, classroom level projects. So today I'll share about several examples from the micro, meso, as well as the macro level. At the micro level, it could be, for example, the analysis of hidden pedagogical motifs in a AI-enabled system. At the meso level, it could be harnessing entropy from a pedagogical system. At the meso level, we can use unified analytics across several projects using AI, as well as in an ecosystem. So why do we need to use AI at all? Well, one of the problems faced by education researchers is that our data is not linearly correlated because they're curves. So what you're looking down on the screen are performance curves of students, learning curves literally. So for instance, the curves could depict the hours spent in using the AI system, the scores that the students achieve in the AI system. The non-cognitive aggregated scores could indicate their motivation levels, interest levels, engagement levels, and so forth. So how do we use AI to correlate the data between the curves? Well, one of the techniques is to use RSM, response surface methodology, which we can apply using AI techniques. Another problem faced by educational researchers is the data that we use may not be linearly correlated because they are time series data. Why time series data? Because, for instance, in wearable devices on the wrist of the students, we can measure the stress levels, and we can have data from EEGs and ECGs. So these are time series data. We can use AI to correlate them to find leverageable points to improve their learning experiences. So we can use AI augmented thinking to inform policy making. The notion of AI thinking was first offered by Professor Daniel Zheng in 2013 as a framework that can be used for leveraging quantitative and qualitative data analytics with cognitive computing, enhancing learning, challenging humans to interpret new findings from machine-learned discovery of hidden patterns in data. So from the point of researchers and policymakers, we can meaningfully frame our research questions possibly in these ways. For instance, for RQ1, we can ask what are the current conditions, what are the current constraints, what are uncertainties, because AI is good at measuring probabilities and uncertainties. So we can further ask in RQ2, what are the factors that interplay in the system to influence different outcomes? Because using AI, we can do predictive modeling to see where we can apply direct interventions or integrating multiple indirect interventions to improve the students' and teachers' learning experiences. So using AI, the education stakeholders can collaboratively ask better questions. So instead of being led by AI, humans can lead AI in the use of analytics to make the experiences of students and teachers better. So we can avoid at-risk educational scenarios using AI simulations. We can also enable better coordination between education stakeholders using AI. So here I'd like to float a suggestion that there could be a formation of a multidisciplinary collaboratory for strategic policy oversights of safe deployments of artificial intelligence in education. So in my experience in OER, I've been fortunate to be seconded to assist ETD to evaluate some of the AI systems that's currently being trialed in the schools. So it is my observation that AI deployed in education already surpassed the human teacher in terms of ability to relentlessly perform the tasks of one-to-one tutoring, initiate checks. However, we need coordination efforts between the education stakeholders in order to make it safe for the teachers and the students when they're using AI. So currently, if I'm not wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, there is no one unified body to oversee the safety of the AI systems before they are deployed in the schools at scale. So exactly how can strategic oversights be applied on AI in education? Well, this is a screenshot of the software that we're using in OER to analyze the hidden pedagogical motives in AI adaptive learning system, because the vendor will always tell us that their system is safe for the students, is very good, enables good learning and so forth, but it will be remiss if we don't independently evaluate the AI systems using our methods. So why do we use AI to evaluate AI? Because just like diamond can be used to cut diamond, we can use AI to evaluate AI also. So in my work assisting ETD to evaluate the various AI vendors, I presented this idea to them of how to compare the various vendors' performances deployed in various schools with students of different learning abilities. So I used the multi-quadrant analysis that you see on the left to compare the performance curves of the various AI systems that's being used by the students. So we can also harness multi-paradigm concepts using AI to see where we can find leverageable points to improve the school. So here we are harnessing the concept of entropy in the pedagogy system, for example, in the school. So parts of a pedagogy system will perform better if entropy, which represents the concept of disorder, is limited, and therefore, if a pedagogical system is sufficiently ordered, low entropy, teaching and learning will be accentuated. However, sometimes we need to introduce some disorder in order to challenge the students to learn better. So here's another example at a meso level where AI can be used to pull together the data from the various projects in the programmatic project. And this diagram was guided by Sham, who is also here. Hi, Sham. She guided me in how to put together all these components of this analytical diagram. So in terms of the lifelong, life-wise, life-deep, life-wide framework, we can also utilize AI to, in conjunction with this concept called objectives and key results, which is innovated by Intel, Andy Grove at Intel, to pull together all the data from the various different projects to see which are the areas where we can make improvements to the teachers and the students. So in terms of qualitative analysis for policy research, I've also contributed diagrams such as this. Even if you don't have quantitative data, I can still produce diagrams like this for you in your projects. This is an example of a system dynamics diagram, because sometimes for policymakers, when we present to them a neural network, it might be too much for them to and for many people to understand. So I'll be happy to produce a system dynamics diagram that looks like this for you, so that we can have meaningful conversation with the policymakers and the various educational stakeholders. So here you see that we can scrub along the data from the left to the right and back and forth along the longitudinal data to find what are the conditions that contribute to various learning outcomes. For example, in this diagram, you can see that interest, collaborative, motivation, emotional quotient, etc., all work in concert to contribute to the social emotional learning of the students. So last but not least, I've been working on explorations of how to use 3D agent-based modeling for informing policymakers about safe distancing on campuses. So here you can see a 3D simulated model of perhaps, for example, in NTU North Spine, where the people can walk along, and you can see on the diagram that the people highlighted in red have problems doing social distancing. And here's another one in the lecture theater scenario. So thank you very much, everyone. That's the end of my sharing. Thank you.